rolling? All right, well, cheers, buddy.
Cheers.
Thanks for the coffee, man.
Yeah, man. Y'all have no idea what we went through to make this happen today.
That was the longest troubleshoot of technical difficulties I think I've ever been a part of.
It
and I've had
well
my fair share
have been
on
my
this show.
fault, but yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and crack this open.
Yeah, it's a good. But it's good to see you, man. It's been, other than the last couple hours where we were trying to figure out audio problems, it's been a while.
It has
like
probably
years.
at least 4.5. It's been 4, I think, a little over 4.
You were not married last time I saw you.
No, I wasn't
for sure.
married. I was with the same girl though. You know,
You were.
going on 11 years now with the same woman.
Oh, dude,
So,
that's legit.
It really is, man. It feels great.
That's awesome. So, like, how does it feel to be an adult?
Honestly, I love it. I'm surrounded by people that are constantly, man, I wish I was a kid again and I miss how it was. And I was like, no, like I do not miss being a kid at all. I love having the ability to turn life into whatever I want it, because I kind of felt like school was a prison. Can't go anywhere when you want to, can't do anything. I had plans when I was a kid. Other kids were just like, I want to play video games. Like, I want to do that too, but I got like a whole life I want to build for myself, and now I can actually chase that. So I love being an adult.
Oh, yeah, man. That's awesome. Do you feel like an adult, though? Like, let's be honest. Do you feel grown up yet, or do you kind of feel... Well, actually, I know I'm older than you, but how old are you?
28.
Oh, you're 28. Okay. So I'm 35. Right? Am I 35, Denise? Yeah, I'm 35.
I'm
I'll
at
be
that age
36
now where I
next
have
month.
to question it too. So
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't really matter at this point. Especially
Right.
once you get past 30, it's just kind of like, yeah. But like I say this all the time, like I don't really feel, I don't know at what point I'm going to start to feel like an adult. Like I know I'm an adult, and I recognize that there are things that like I have to do sometimes where I
Right.
feel like, oh, I'm doing adult stuff. Like I'm
Right.
paying tax, or I'm filing my taxes and stuff like that. But you have to do that when you're 18. You know what I mean? Like you still have
Right.
to do that stuff. So I don't know, but we have our
Right.
third child on the way, and I legitimately still, like, I don't feel a whole lot different than I did when I'm 20 as far as like my mindset and mentality. Do you have any of that going on, or?
no, man. I mean,
too?
it's so funny. I actually, me and my wife went to go see a lecture by Jordan Peterson. Like,
Love Jordan Peterson.
me too. He's a great guy. But we went and saw him in Pensacola like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he talked on one of the rules in his book is pick one thing, and I can't remember the exact like wording he used, but it's basically try choosing one thing in life and get really good at it, or pick one goal and chase it for a long time, and basically just like grow as you're chasing this goal. And I was like, as I was watching his lecture, I was like, man, I love that, and I feel like my life is an example of how true that is, because in every aspect of my life, that's what I've done. Since I was 14, I remember being in my bedroom the moment where I was like, okay, I know what I want to do with my life. I want to be a musician. And I don't know anything about how that works. I couldn't even play an instrument.
Wow.
I didn't know I could sing either. Like I was like, I just know that this is what I want to do with my life, and I'm about to devote everything I have to that. That's like where my main interest is. And so I just made it a goal. And over the course of, from then till now, a decade and a half, that's all I've done. But then also same thing with like my marriage. Like whenever I was with, when me and Taylor first got together, I had been, it's high school, so it's different than when you're an adult.
Sure.
Viewing relationships. But even then I was like, all right, I'm not here to, to fool around. Like if I'm going to be in a relationship with someone, I want it to be, a serious thing. But I also want it to be fulfilling. And like, I knew exactly what I wanted. And after working on a relationship for 10, 11 years, like every part of my life is like, I've stuck with that thing, gotten better at it and developed, and I'm in a really good place now. So yeah, that rule spoke to me a lot.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Congratulations.
Thanks, dude.
I definitely had a lot of that same stuff going on when I met Denise, who of course is now my wife. We met in Bible college. We met in our freshman year, and it just, something clicked. I mean, we became friends really, really fast. We became really good friends to the point that I considered her my best friend, like really quick. And we knew we wanted to start dating each other, but we were also in this place where there was a rule at our Bible college. You couldn't date anybody for the first semester.
Right.
And so we waited till the second semester, but then we didn't want to be all like, like, okay, day one of spring semester, like let's start dating. You know,
Right.
like we wanted to kind of
Right.
let it marinate a little bit longer, and we really did like we wanted to make sure our leadership at the school was on board. We really respected
Right.
them, and we weren't just trying to like kind of toe the line as far as relationships go,
Yeah.
because we knew even then, like before we even started dating, which wasn't until it was March 27th. I remember because it was Easter.
Nice.
I called her dad, who I had to. Denise wrote out what to say. Well, I told, because I had to talk to her parents, or I decided I wanted to talk to her parents and kind of get their blessing
Yeah.
to start dating her, and they didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Spanish at that time. And so I kind of wrote out for Denise what I wanted to say, and then she
Yeah.
translated it into Spanish. And then when I called her dad, I was like reading this thing in Spanish, and I'm sure I was pronouncing stuff horribly.
That's
and
adorable.
All that and looking back, it was pretty adorable. We were at my grandma's house at the time. It was fun. It was fun.
Nice.
But I don't remember why I brought that up. But yeah. So, but even then, like before we even started officially dating, I already knew she was my wife.
Right.
I'm pretty sure she knew I was her husband, right? she's sitting across from me right now. I'm waiting for that approval. She might have had some doubts. Were there doubts? No, we're good. So yeah, but we already knew, and it was just basically, let's continue to get to know each other. Let's
Yeah.
finish college. Like, let's do, what
Yeah.
we're doing. Let's focus on that and not like, rush into things. But we knew.
Right.
I mean, so we dated for a few years just as like protocol or whatever
Right.
you want to call it. But that was one area that did click really, really quickly for us. But
Right. That's awesome.
Other
That's
than
pretty similar to me and Taylor's story. Like, one thing though about Taylor that kind of I was very attracted to is that she's definitely always been far more mature beyond her years. And when I was a kid, now I'm not gonna say like so was I, but like in my perspective, I was like, very few kids know their kids, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I was like 18, I was like, I've had a lot of mentors such as my grandfather and like old youth pastors that like had a large influence on me, and they kind of helped me realize, I was like, okay, I will probably be an entirely different person next year, or at least in the next like 3 years. But you develop and change as an individual like
Yeah.
every year of your life, and you look back and you go, wow, I was dumb, or like you think like, wow, I don't think like that at all anymore. And so even as a kid, I was like, all right, I acknowledge that that's going to be a thing. And so I would try to, look towards the future. And when it came to Taylor, I was like, okay, thank God. There's already like 20 things that every other person my age is like waving red flags around, like they're in a dang parade. And she doesn't have any of those. So we started dating, and we felt that way pretty quickly too, where we were like, really close and talking about, well, we weren't talking about marriage, but we knew that we felt that way. But we also knew like, well, who knows, in a couple years, like when we get comfortable around each other and you're not like doing your
Trying.
hair,
You're like-
trying and doing your hair and makeup and ironing your clothes
trying
every
to
time you're
impress me.
around each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, things could start to fall apart, but we didn't think that would happen. But then again, we also acknowledged no one thinks that will happen. No
Well-
one does. So we were very careful and cautious, and we did the same thing where we were like, a lot of people were like, by year 4, why aren't you guys married? You've been together for 4 years. And we're like, well, I'm still trying to figure out like my career thing, and she's still in college. Like, I would really hate for us to be like, let's do it because we've been together for 4 years since high school, and then be like, cool, we're married and living with our parents now. That sucks. So we got married on year 8. I would never suggest to anyone that that's the year you
Sure.
should do what we did, but like it was what was right for us for sure.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I think that well, obviously it worked because you're here, you're married. You've been married for a couple of years.
Yeah, a little over 2 years now.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome, man. Congratulations. And like obviously that path has worked for you. And that was one of the things that we definitely noticed when we were kind of in that Bible college like ministry sort of bubble atmosphere.
Yeah.
Of like people doing it a certain way, like people going about their relationships a certain way, and kind of seeing that, and like, I get you can start to feel that pressure. You can start to feel the pressure of, well, this is how everybody's doing it, so maybe we're doing something wrong because we're not doing it that way.
Right.
And even like, like we started dating, And there were people, friends of ours, several people, couples that we knew that we were friends with, where they started dating after us and got married before us, and like stuff like that. And so you start to look around and you're like what are we doing something wrong here? And you can kind of start to feel that pressure until you kind of pull back the perspective and recognize, hold on, like I'm not them, they're not me. That's their path, that's where they are, but that doesn't mean that it's right and that what I'm doing is wrong. And I think that in really all aspects of life, that kind of thing is really essential to recognize, that you're on your own path, your own stories being written, and to not do that comparison game, because that can get really destructive depending on, you know, what you're talking about.
I think people did that to me and Taylor. Like, they would compare us to other people without us even having to do it. And that's why when they would ask, like, why are you guys married yet? You're on year 5 or year 6. And we would just be like, you know, we want to get married, and that is something that is definitely a goal, but like, we want to set our marriage up for success, and we feel like we would be setting it up for failure if we did it at this point in our lives. Not because anything is wrong with our relationship, but we're just not positioned financially, or, you know, give the reason. But we were, we just wanted to set it up for success and not rush into it, because it wasn't like, oh, we don't know each other. That was one thing I always do encourage people to do, is if you want to know that the person is right for you, a lot of people, nothing against people that got married in year 1, but to me, I'm like, I usually say, I think coming up to 3 years is pretty much the perfect time, because within 3 years, most people will experience a death in the family. Most people will experience a complete change of your daily routine, such as a new job or graduating from college. They will experience life change. And a lot of times relationships can't stand that change. Like, so if you can really go through a stage of your life and still be with that person, and you know that they will be there for you through that, they're here for the good and the bad. We take that vow really for granted, the whole, like, in sickness and in health. But like, I remind my wife that all the time. Like, if things get really bad and she starts to feel like, you know, like she's personally going through something that's a burden on me, or like vice versa, I remind her, like, hey, stop that. I told you at the altar, in sickness and in health, and I really meant that. Like, it's actually for me an honor to be there with her through her struggles. It's not a burden, you know. And I feel like, to anybody who's in a marriage or relationship, if it's a burden to go through those struggles with them, then maybe it wasn't right. But that's just me, you know.
Wow. That's really good wisdom, for real, because as you're saying that, I'm thinking back, and that's exactly what happened with Denise and I in our relationship. During that time when we were in that dating phase, my father passed away. During that time we were in that dating phase, I mean, to be honest with you, we had a lot of struggles, because we had this long distance relationship going on, where she was in Mexico and I was in America for a good portion of our time together. So we were together in Bible college, but then she did a couple semesters, right? I don't know, at least one or two, I think a couple semesters that she did from home, that she did by correspondence. And we weren't together, and we were still dating, and that was tough. Like, it definitely tested our relationship a lot. And when we did have the times when we were together and spending, you know, lots of time with each other, we fought a lot. Like, we had a lot of things that came up, because there was all this, like, tension. There were cultural differences, there were language barriers to an extent. Her English was amazing, but the way that I would say things would sometimes come off to her as rude or something like that, and I didn't know
you didn't mean it that way.
Yeah, exactly. But it was just differences of that sort of language, cultural kind of a thing, where we took things the wrong way sometimes. It built up tension and put pressure on the relationship, to where we were kind of like at each other's throats about things at certain times. I'm not talking about the entire time we were together, but there were we saw each other's ugly parts for sure. And we saw our worst fights happened before we got married, which I don't think is probably most people's experience. But, you know, there wasn't this thing of like, oh, now you're married, you're going to really find out who that person is. Not in a negative way, I can say. Like, we, of course, we've had our own struggles and everything, but I think the worst fights that we had kind of gotten them out of the way. And so what that did for me was, it actually made me feel like this isn't going to work. Like if we're fighting now and we're going through this now,
Right.
there's no way we can be together. Like we can't get married. Like I was kind of having that going on in my mind. And I had we had a mentor in Bible college who we were kind of expressing those things to him. And he was like, well, I'm actually really happy to hear you say that because, if you've gone through what you've gone through like this and you're still together, you're remaining loyal to each other, there's still love there, that tells me that you actually have what it takes to make it.
Right.
And it's been good, man. It's been really, really good. And I'm not just saying
That's
that because
awesome.
my wife is in the room. But anyway, I think that's really
You'll tell
good
me when
wisdom
you
what you
leave. I'm
said. And again, not to put anybody in that box of it's got to be 3 years or it's got to be this amount of time.
Right. It's different for everybody.
But sure.
Right.
But I think that is just really, really sound wisdom, giving yourself time to grow together, to see life changes take place, especially when you're young.
Right.
They say that like your frontal lobe isn't fully developed until
Yeah,
you're like
definitely.
25, definitely
Right.
early 20s and stuff like that.
And we got people having kids and getting married at like 19, and I'm like,
For sure.
oh my goodness.
For sure. And thank God when it works out.
Right. Thank God when it works out for anybody. I mean, we say
Yeah.
that where it's like there's probably some 19-year-olds that have great marriage right now,
Sure.
and they're like, how
Sure.
dare you? Meanwhile, we've all met that 40-year-old person where we're like, your life's a mess.
Yeah, exactly.
So it doesn't. Wisdom doesn't always come with time.
Yeah, that's true too. There's balance in everything that we're
Right.
saying. But
I think it comes with what experiences that life throws at you, and sometimes people are unfortunately not given the right experiences, if that makes sense. I think all the hard stuff that we deal with are usually blessings in disguise, because people with extremely easy lives or people without mentors who have at least seen a thing or two tend to struggle a bit. I think that's just what I've seen in my experience anyway.
Yeah, for real, man. Well, thank you for coming here and doing this with me. We even coordinated. We're like wearing the same thing.
Did, man. You could join my band. This is what this look. Like we get picked on by the local scene, or like, oh, it's After Dusk if they're all is just wearing black, all of them just straight black, and we're like, yeah, it's just.
Dude, even
we
down
are.
to the black ring,
Dude,
and everything.
That's like one of my favorite parts about the married thing is now I get this black ring. It's just the dopest accessory. I'm married and it looks cool.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's awesome. Well, so After Dusk, man, let's talk. I thought about. Well, I started to see stuff online on Facebook, and I'd been kind of noticing things for a while. Again, you and I hadn't really had a ton of contact. Maybe. Being on a similar thread on Facebook here and there, laughing at somebody's comment or something like that, but nothing substantial.
Right.
And more recently, I started to see you guys posting some things about your band and able to check out your music, and just honestly really blown away.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely, and I mean it. I'm not just saying that. But I've actually I've showed it to some people. I've been like, yo, like, what do you think about this? Like, I'm like, I know this guy. We used to work together, and that whole thing. And I was like, dude, I got to get this guy on the podcast and just talk about the band, talk about the music, talk about our love for Jesus, talk about whatever it is that comes up. But again, I do appreciate you for taking the time and sitting down with me.
I was actually dude, this is the weirdest thing. So like for those that don't know, we said we had technical difficulties earlier, and so I had to run to my studio to pick up a piece of gear that I thought might help. It didn't, but I went to go get the piece of gear, and I realized when I got in the car, I was like, well, I have a minute, and I hadn't had an opportunity to see your interview with Chad Johnson yet, so I was like, sweet, I'll just start listening to that on the way there. And this is the weirdest thing. I have to get to a stoplight, and Chad, during the interview, he mentions that he was telling a story, and he was like, I hit the horn of my Honda CRV3 or something like that, whatever the car was he was driving. And as he said that, I had just looked up, and the car in front of me had like the spare tire on the back of the car, and it was the big logo of the exact car he said. So I read that as he said it, and I was like, whoa,
That's dope.
Weird. I've never even seen one of those cars before, and it's all of a sudden, so very weird. Sorry,
It must mean something. It's got to mean something. Let's analyze this.
Or it means nothing at all, and I'm
could-
just a weirdo.
It could mean zero. It could mean lots. It could mean that you're in the right place at the right time.
Exactly.
It could mean
That's actually really funny that I didn't even mean to take it there with that. But So we're releasing an EP, another EP. We have 4 coming out this year, actually.
Wow.
We've already released one. The next one comes out on the 22nd. And we have a song on the EP called Think Outside Your Head. And there's actually like a couple songs on the record that speak on this. But I found that, interestingly enough, we were talking about like Christian culture and everything. And you ever met like one of those people where like everything that happens was like a move of the hand of God? You know, like, and I always tell this
Many
story.
of those.
I won't say who. I have a friend and his mother, and I witnessed this. His mother told us the story of how that morning she went to Walmart and she was in a big hurry, and God procured a parking spot at the very front of the Walmart so she could get her groceries on time.
It was like the Red Sea parting.
Right. And I thought, I was like, it's good to be grateful, but that might not be healthy, because for your prayer to get home on time that was answered, there's a kid starving in Africa who's praying real hard right now. So, so I don't know, but we wrote a song kind of about that, where the whole point of the song is like, take into consideration that some things might just happen because that was the roll of the dice, and you might be over spiritualizing parts of your life, which when you do that, you are almost I don't know how to explain it. You're taking the parts of your life that really might be spiritual, if something important, and you're making it less than, because everything you do and see is just like over spiritualized, and so you won't actually recognize where God's hand is intervening if you think it's in everything. You know, like I dropped my phone earlier, and maybe the crack on the lens now will affect me somehow later. You know, that was orchestrated by God. You know.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, no, that's crazy. This is, I feel like this is about to get deep.
Yeah.
So we can definitely over spiritualize stuff to that point, and you can start to, it can actually become, as you said, really unhealthy, to the point where you can kind of feel like God is controlling you.
Right.
Where you can start to feel like everything is kind of out of your hands, and everything is kind of this thing where, if you start to feel like everything means something, then what that actually does is it sets you up to the place where things happen that you then have no way of explaining.
Right.
So like, people will say, well, you know, how can God allow, as you mentioned, children to be starving in Africa or in our own backyard? Or, you know, how can these tragic things happen? How can COVID happen? How can all these different things happen in the world where there's tragedy all around us? If there's a God, you know, if there's a God who loves us, and if there's a God who's powerful, and all this, and I think that we can end up in a really unhealthy place, and essentially setting ourselves up for failure with things that we just can't explain. And there's certain things that I just you know, there's things that I would say I'm baffled by. Like, how does that happen? Like, just yesterday I saw a post, and I was reading about this pastor couple in, I think, New Mexico or somewhere, and they have 3 children. Well, they had 3 children. They were, all 5 of them were in a car, and a horrific accident happened. Mom and dad both killed, and all 3 children survived.
Oh, man.
And they were all in the back seat, and thankfully the children survived, but now they have, both of their parents are gone.
Right.
And we're talking about parents that are in ministry, that love the Lord, and it was just like a very, you know, tragic thing. And you say, I had a moment where I was like, and it wasn't at all like blaming God for anything, like not even a little bit, but it was this question in my mind, like how does that happen? Like, why does that happen? And we all go through life with those questions of why and how different things happen. And Jesus even said that it's not my will that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance.
Right.
What that tells me is that there's things happening all around us that are not the will of God.
Right, exactly.
There's all kinds of tragic things happening in life that are not God's will. God's not bringing destruction into your life. God's not doing those things.
Right.
And when we go down that sort of unhealthy path, and we start to think, oh, well, it must be God's will. If it happened, it must be God's will.
Yeah, I always, growing up, I absolutely hated, even as a teenager, because I heard it in church a lot, everything happens for a reason. And a lot of times people would say that to comfort you, like, oh, you're going through this hard thing, but it's happening for a reason, and you'll understand it later. I hated that, because I was like, it might not, though. Because I'm not saying that God can't take a bad situation and use it for the good later.
100%.
But it doesn't always mean that he meant that he like said, I'm going to make that a thing. Like I'm going to make this car crash that your loved one perished in and turn it into something great later.
Right.
No, that's just a tragedy.
Exactly.
Sometimes things just happen. And like you were saying earlier, when you do that, number one, I think it's kind of narcissistic to attribute like the smallest little blessing to just like God being like, hold the phone, I'll deal with Al Qaeda later. Right now I got to make sure you get, like you get your Starbucks today or whatever. Like I think, or whatever horrible things going on. Like I think it's kind of narcissistic of us, but then it also, when bad things happen, you can't explain it because that too has to be God. So I think that's just, I think it's something unhealthy that we kind of need to move away from because it strips you of your free will. If everything happens for a reason, it's like, okay, do you actually believe that some people die without salvation? Because I don't think that happens for a reason. I've actually thought about this, and we keep going to like tragedy of like a car crash or whatever, but it works. You hear about like someone who perished in a car crash, and then you find out, oh, they were hit by a drunk driver.
Right.
You would never jump to the conclusion of why would God choose to have that kid perish in the car crash. What you should jump to is, no, that there was an individual who was very irresponsible, and that's on them. Now it really is a tragedy that other people pay for others' mistakes. Sometimes that person doesn't even pay for the mistake. It's a complete different person, but the decisions they made dictated what happened in the world. And then we, as spectators who weren't involved with that incident this time anyway, we also get a choice of how do we react to it. How do we interact with God? How do we, commentate on it to the public or whatever, Everyone gets a choice. And sometimes when the dice are rolled, they don't roll in your favor. And sometimes they really do. But you still get a choice on how to react to that. Some people have it really, really good and they still don't react to it well. And it just causes destruction amongst everyone around them.
Wow.
So...
yeah, and that's something that you hear a lot, like at funerals, and you do hear it a lot when you're dealing with a tragic kind of situation where this is an example that we use all the time, but being at a funeral, and I don't know if anyone listening's ever heard this before, but I certainly have, where someone will say something like, well, God took him. Or somebody will say, well, God needed him more in heaven. God needed her more in heaven, so they took him. Well, okay, so that person had to get shot up.
Right, or whatever. Whatever could have happened.
If God really needed him, like God, there's examples in the Bible of people that God took. Yeah. Like there's a couple examples. But you know what I mean? Like there's an example of, there's an example of Elijah being caught up into heaven and in this whirlwind and all that. Right. There's Enoch walking with God and he was not, for the Lord took him. Like we have a couple of very specific examples we could say that, that's essentially what happened.
Right.
God didn't, send somebody to take them out so that they could get to heaven, And so, I think we for sure need to rethink some things. I think that there's something very, very real that happens where a lot of things are just said, cliche things are said often as a means to try to comfort somebody.
Yeah.
And there's these things that I think that we almost, I don't want to say need, we think that we need in order to feel okay, again, about circumstances that we are either out of our control or that we don't know how to properly explain.
Right.
And I think that there's something very real about living with some mystery in life, like it's okay.
Definitely.
God is so much bigger than us. There are things about this life that he's given to us. There's some things about like all kinds of things that we will never fully understand this side of eternity, but being able to, I think it comes down to trusting God enough that even with things that we can't understand, to not put the blame on him for like why this bad thing happened to me, but also at the same time not blaming him for not intervening on my behalf or not, you know what I mean? Not allowing my faith to be shaken. There's times where, we believe in, praying for the sick. We believe like we've seen miracles happen like many, many times, but there's times when we pray for people and they get better. There's times we pray for people and they don't get better. And it's like, well, what do you do with that?
Right.
If you allow what didn't happen to reshape your theology and your view of who God is, then you weren't really starting from the right foundation in the first place, you know? And it's just, again, I think when we try to approach things from a religious level of thinking, we can set ourselves up for, you know, hurt and pain, because we don't, again, it becomes this thing where we don't know how to explain what happened.
Right. And I think that when it comes to tragedy and things like that, we get kind of self-centered and narcissistic, because I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I don't know if y'all know this.
Don't worry, I won't tell anybody.
None of us are getting out of here alive. None of us. Not a single one of us. Like the idea that like, oh, God just called him up, or God, like, it's fluff to make loved ones feel better. I get that, but it's also kind of bad in the sense that people truly believe that sometimes, and it's like, God doesn't need. You're going to end up there anyway. Like it's not a case of God. If he just waited, it'd be like, crap, this guy's going on 200 years. Like, kind of need him up here now. It's like, no, it's like in a blink of an eye to God that we're all going to be there anyway. Like, we're all going to die. So at the end of it, sometimes we get kind of selfish that someone passed before we were ready, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not saying that to belittle tragedy, because I'm not saying like when someone dies, oh, you shouldn't care because we're all going to die. That's not what I'm saying. Like, I'm just saying that we blame God for things that it's like, it was going to happen anyway, and it's going to happen to you too. Yeah. Maybe not as horrifically, but like at the same time, you know, death is death. Once it's over for you, it's over for you, and then it's just you and God. So he's not. I don't think he's as concerned with that as, because he's like, there's like a lot longer span of time that I'm waiting on, and you're in this one here, and this is really upsetting you. But once you're past this world, you're in this never-ending time. He's more concerned with that, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's definitely biblical and godly to experience, you know, to walk through grief when there is something tragic, and to, you know, pain is real, and as you said, not belittling anybody's pain or tragedy or anything that they've gone through or that they're going through. But at the same time, I think that we can. I think when we hold on too tightly to this world, then I think that, again, we set ourselves up for those kinds of things.
Right.
Again, like, there's something very real. Like, if you lose a friend, you lose a family member, you lose a loved one, or someone gets sick or something like that. Like, that feeling of loss, that feeling of tragedy, that feeling of grief, that feeling of pain, that's real. And you should walk through that, and you should feel that. And I think that God feels that with you. Like, I think that God is emotional. He made us to have emotions. There's something about being people that are alive and that know how to love and that know how to experience sadness and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, keeping that in mind, keeping that idea of eternity in mind. And if all of our hearts and all of our hope is kind of like anchored in this world, in this realm, then we definitely miss out on the bigger picture. I think we have to live in light of eternity. And of course, we still miss people when they're gone. Of course. But there's also this hope that, you know, if we're walking with the Lord and they knew the Lord, that we're going to be together someday. And more importantly, like, they're in a much better place. You know, if we really believe what the Bible says.
That's why I say, like, it's a weird thing, because like you said, there's zero shame in hurting, and when someone does pass on, like, you're going to. It's involuntary.
And it takes time for sure.
It's almost a selfish hurt of ours, because they're not in pain. We're not necessarily hurt for them, especially if you truly believe that there is something beyond this life. Like, if you don't think there's anything beyond this life, and someone passes and you're like, oh man, it's devastating. It's devastating, because you're like, they had this and that and that, and they never got to do this, or they were going to do that, and you just think of everything they lost. But if someone passes and you believe that they are going on to another place, it's like they haven't missed out on anything. If anything, you are. You know what I mean? So it's almost like a selfish hurt, where it's like, there's a hole in my heart. They're more complete than ever. But to me, there's a missing piece where they used to be. And it's going to be harder for me to get through it here without them. And so, but when I say selfish, I don't mean as in you shouldn't feel that way. It's just like a human emotion that you will feel when you lose somebody close to you. It's a part of life. You know?
So that was one of the songs that you brought up that went into that whole conversation. What would you say is like what's been the most well-received song that you've released so far? If you even know this, like, do you know which one has gotten the most listens, the most downloads, the most like love? Is there one that you could point to?
So far, it seems there's two that I think of because they're kind of battling it out right now. We released our first single. I'll start way back, actually. We actually rebranded as a band. We used to have a totally different name, and then we debuted our new name as AFTERDUSK in October of last year. And then we released a music video for a song called Become of Me. And then in January 7th, we released our first EP. It was 3 songs. Become of Me was one of them. And then immediately a song called Unholy Ghosts boom, like it was like, get out of the way, become of me. Like we were like, okay, that wasn't the song. People are liking that song, but Unholy Ghost has really done really well. It's been #1 on our Spotify and everything so far. And then we just released another music video for a song called Love Is Dead, and it's gone up to #2. It hasn't quite been knocked Unholy Ghost off yet, but it is catching up. So we're really glad people liked the songs. I don't know. I kind of like. Yeah. Every time we release one of these EPs, I'm going to be like, okay, cool. I feel like I expect this one to do the best. I almost like it whenever I get shocked and the public says, no, this one, I really like this one. I'm like, oh, sweet,
Yeah.
Cool, because I didn't have as much faith in that one. But
that's really cool. I was just talking to someone about this, how it's funny, the things that catch on are, sometimes not being the thing that you expected, or you said like, oh, I've put so much into this project, or like this is the one that to me sounds the best, but for whatever reason sometimes it's a little bit hard to gauge what's going to take off and what's going to really, hopefully they all, people hear that one that maybe is a little bit more popular or whatever, and then it leads them to check out what else you have there, and it just leads people to following, or being able to really hear everything that you have to offer.
One cool thing about being in the genre of metal, it's cool and it's annoying because of the conversation surrounding it. You have when you go like talk to someone who that listens to hip hop, they don't have like a specific like offshoot of hip hop that they listen to per se. Like I listen to hip hop. With metal, it's like, oh, you listen to metal? No, man, I listen to metalcore. I listen to hardcore. I like grindcore. I got this deathcore. I got like literally probably 20 to 30 different genres, and they will fight to the death over which is the best and what their favorite act is. It's a electronic deathcore, But with us, that is actually a really good plus because we can pull from we can basically stay within the same genre that we love and then make a bunch of different stuff. So like on our album, I feel like to most people that I speak to, they're going to have a different favorite song or a favorite group of songs because we don't pull from like one type of metal group. We pull from like a whole bunch of them. And we like to make sure that every couple songs, it's like, let's do something like totally different with this one. That way, like, if you aren't in love with that kind, like this is your stuff, maybe we'll be an introduction to that other style of heavy music. So
I just realized in the throes of our technical difficulties and trying to get everything worked out, I did want to have some of your music pulled up that we could kind of maybe play some clips here and there. So what I'll try to do, if it works out, is I'll see if I could add some stuff in after the fact, or at least leave some links to where they can definitely check some stuff out. But
and I can send you the video. You can download it. You'll have the video.
That'd be awesome. And like what would you say, do you consider your genre to be metal, or do you consider it to be on like the metalcore side, or how would you describe it?
I think this is kind of funny you bring this up. We're a metalcore band for sure, mostly influenced by metalcore bands. But our producer actually described us as progressive metalcore recently.
Okay,
and we were like,
I like it.
Oh, really? Like, because we always viewed like the progressive metalcore bands as like that means you're super technical and you're kind of pushing the envelope and you're just like the virtuosos, which I don't know. I think my guitarist he would never say that. Chris Rivera is his name. He's an incredible guitarist, and he blows my mind with the things that he comes up with and the things that he can play. I have to tell him to shut up all the time because he'll be like listening to a Silent Planet song or like something from Animals as Leaders, and he'd be like, I could never play that. Give me 10 minutes. And he's like sitting there and he learns it. And he acts like, oh, I didn't think I could do that. And I'm like, we knew you could though.
Never doubted you.
So like, I guess we're a progressive metalcore band, which I think is kind of cool, kind of an honor to be described that way.
Love it. So there's a line, and I'm gonna read it because I don't want to butcher it. So there's a line in the song, "State of Mind, State of Mind."
Yeah.
So there's a line in this song that I love, and it says, "My senses tell the brain what the body wants. The problem is my body never knows the cost." I listened to that line, and I was like, "Yo, that's a dope line."
Nice.
Do you remember like what the sort of what went into that in particular? Like
So
what the
when we started writing, me and these boys actually used to be in separate bands. They were a three-piece called Outlast the End. I had my own band. When that started falling apart, we joined together, and we started writing music together for the first time. And that was the first or second song we wrote, actually. This is going to turn into a 12-song album. So it's one of the earliest ones we wrote. Originally, we were just going to release a 3-song EP under the old name that we had. And all 3 songs, on Holy Ghost was one of them as well. All 3 songs dealt with mental afflictions or just issues. And that song's about addiction. And that could come in any form, whether it's to drugs or alcohol. It could be to be a sexual addiction. It can be an addiction on any level. It could just be a bad habit that is destructive to your life in general, to your marriage or whatever. And so I wrote that from the perspective of that's why it's called State of Mind. State of Mind is it's all in your head. It's about the chemicals in your brain and how you're reacting to things out here in the physical world. And so that part is literally like my senses tell the brain what the body wants. So that's the craving of whatever action that you are trying to fight against. The problem is my body never knows the cost. Sometimes it is physical, but sometimes it's just mental. Sometimes the damage you're doing, it's always self-inflicted addiction. It might not be drugs or alcohol where you can physically feel and see it, but other addictions or habits can be mentally damaging, and you don't understand what you're doing to yourself whenever you willingly engage in destructive habits. So that's where I was coming from on that song.
Wow. Is that a theme that, well, let me just mention real quick, our camera person had to leave for a few minutes, so if you're watching this, the video is going to stay on Matt. So so just so you know, don't pick your nose or anything while I'm talking because they'll see it. I'm just saying. This is not, you're not free right now,
right? Okay.
to do whatever, start pulling wedgies out or whatever the thing is. But
I
anyway,
don't mind if Duke sees it. You guys can't see it though.
But we'll be back to normal in a few minutes. But would you say is that a theme that comes up often in your music, or like those kinds of things? It's interesting how a lot of times in this genre of music, if we're talking about metal, or we're talking about like in this genre, the things that come out in this kind of music tend to be, not always, sometimes there's more lighthearted things, but for the most part it's intense themes. It's themes of loss, themes of regret, themes of brokenness, themes of addiction, themes of where do you have is that something that comes out would you say a lot in the writing that you guys do, or is everything just kind of, I don't know, like I'm not totally sure how to phrase this question, but
it definitely does.
There definitely tends to be like really intense sort of themes when we're talking about metal. We're talking about things that are being expressed from the hearts of people, and it's interesting, and I think that's why so many people connect with it. At least one of the reasons. I mean, we love the blast beats, we love the breakdowns, we love the feel of it, but I think so many people connect to this music scene because they feel like there's a realness there, and there's people that are willing to write about things that are speaking to their state of mind and whatever. Would you say, is that something that kind of goes through your minds as artists and as you're creating and figuring out what your songs are going to be about and stuff like that?
Most definitely. I think that I mean, it like you said, it's an intense sound for music.
Yeah.
It's very angry sometimes, or very, very just emotionally distraught. And so that's what you end up making the lyrics about. It would be kind of strange if I was like, I just ate ice cream and the sun is shining, like.
Well, I always think about like taking a Taylor Swift song and just like turning it metal.
I Prevail beat you to it quite a few years ago, and now they're a big band because of it.
Exactly.
But also because their original music is awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly. But I think that like poppy music that's like more happy-go-lucky is very much, even like stuff that's on the radio is very much forget your problems, forget what's going on in your real life right now, have a good time, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's definitely a place for that.
Sure.
But even in those lyrics, you're going to see that the lyrics will usually reflect the however the music makes you feel. And for me personally, I mean, I've had a really good life, but I understand that when I look around the world that most of life is suffering, and it's humans basically waging a war against that suffering. How can I make this place I'm forced to be in a better place? How can I make my life and the people around me in my life, how can I make it better? And so I always gravitated more towards heavier music, rock music, because I'm not a very emotional guy. I'm really not. I don't cry often, or movies don't really make me emotional, but one of the few things that can make me feel emotion strongly is music. So I think that's why I became so obsessed with music and interested in it from a young age, because I have too much of an analytical brain, like sometimes to my detriment. Sometimes I can look at something that should very much be bringing me to tears and make me feel awful, and I can rationalize it and be like, I understand this, it sucks, but like I'm not really affected by it emotionally. I feel like a robot sometimes, and music pulls me out of that and helps me to feel, I think, a lot of times. So I was always interested in any kind of art, whether it was movies or music, that would actually make me feel something. So I'm always interested in sad music. Like, it's not metal, but like one of my favorite bands in the world is called This Wild Life. It's just two dudes. They're from the punk and metal scene, but they're tattooed. The whole thing. The singer's got a big old beard, and they just play acoustic love songs.
Wow.
And they sing about heartache, and he has a very soft spoken voice. It's one of my favorite things in the world.
Yeah.
I have to send you some of their music. And they will make me cry. I absolutely love it because I can feel where they're coming from, even whenever they're singing about situations. Like, I've never been through that, but I feel the emotion and the way that you present your art. But yeah, we definitely write about that a lot. And I have the luxury too of having another individual in my band who is Chris. I was talking about, our guitarist. He's also a beautiful singer and a wonderful songwriter. So we're almost 50-50 writing these songs. Like, there are some songs where I write all the lyrics, some songs where he wrote all the lyrics and melodies, and then some where we worked together and we did about 50-50. So I get to sing some songs where it's not my perspective, it's his perspective. And that's great because we've both lived different lives and we can pull from different experiences. And I absolutely love doing that.
That's awesome, man. What would you say have been some of your biggest influences in terms of other bands and other music, that have, so what other bands, other things that you've been into would you say have had the most profound impact on kind of, whether we're talking about your style, your sound,
right,
we're talking about the sonic side of things, or even more the emotional side of things? Do you have that in your mind of like some other bands that have had a big impact on the way that you guys write and create music?
I do. I have some that are really, really personal just to me and not the rest of my band. And then we have a bunch of artists, especially like for the modern era, that influences. One, this is so funny. I get picked on for this, but I don't care. Like, you guys can suck my pinky. Like, I am a huge Skillet fan. I love Skillet. And I've listened to them since I was like 14. And I remember picking the album Comatose apart and being like, how do you even write a song?
Yeah.
And these guys got a girl on the drums, and they got someone playing the cello and the violin. And I was like, how do you make this? Like, I knew nothing about it. And I was like, I want to do that. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I don't know how they're doing it, but that's what I want to do. And so, and I'm not saying that like their albums, all their albums are flawless because like I pick apart their newer ones, but and then there's stuff that I really love and stuff that I'm not game on. But
Sure.
That album specifically, Comatose, for sure, changed my life.
I wore that album out back in the day, man.
Yeah, and I still revisit it at least once a year. You know, it's just one of those ones that affected me so heavily. Anne Boleyn is a big one as well. Their album Cities really, as a piece of art and a lyrical masterpiece, in my opinion, just front to back. Like Finn is like one of my favorite songs of all time, which is the strangest thing because it's like 7.5 minutes long, and that's not usually people's favorite songs. But so Anne Boleyn was a big one. Under Oath for sure. That was my first metal band ever getting into it. A buddy of mine in middle school showed me Under Oath.
In middle school. So about what year would that have been roughly?
8th grade. That would have been 2008 then.
Okay. Awesome.
Easy for me to keep up with because the year was always the grade I was in.
Yeah, they were one of my first for sure. And it was probably, let's see, I was in high school. I remember getting into them, and I went and I saw them in Philly, and it was before They're Only Chasing Safety came out. So it was like when they were like more on the, I guess the metal, you know, they had a little bit of a different, a little bit of a different feel.
Taylor was
actually a very different feel. Yeah, and so, but then I just remember, dude, when that album came out, like we raced to the record store after school. And I remember like passing one of my buddies on the way to the record store, and he had gotten out before me, and he was like waving it out the window. He's like, "I got it before you," and that became like just so many songs on that album just became like almost like anthems to me. And it was like them and Emery and a few other bands like Dead Poetic and Beloved and bands like that were kind of like my induction into the heavier side of music.
So we're both tooth and nail solid state babies for sure.
Yeah, bro.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
I figured so. I actually have a weird experience with Under Oath because, like, I've heard a lot of people say basically that that's like how they found them was Chasing Safety. So I didn't know who they were until they had just released. I said 8th grade. I think it was 7th grade because it was 2007. Because Define the Great Line had only been out for maybe a year to a year and a half.
Yeah, I think that was 06.
It was 6. So, so I think it was like a little bit into my right before 8th grade. So I found that record, and a buddy of mine suggested it, and my mom took me to the local Christian music store, and I got out and I bought the CD with a really weird cover. I bought the deluxe. I'd never heard them. There was no internet. There was no streaming. I just trusted my friend's judgment. Yeah. And I had a little bit of money I got for a birthday or something, and I bought the deluxe version, which was, it just came with like a behind the scenes DVD, and that stuff always interests me. And I didn't have like a computer with YouTube, so that's how I got to see that stuff. So I bought the album, got in the car. My mom wasn't paying attention. She's like, it's a Christian bookstore, whatever. And she gets in and she sees the cover, and I'm looking through the booklet, and there's like these weird like ghost creatures in the booklet, and their eyes are lighting up, and they're like, ah. And she's like, what demonic crap did you just buy out of the Christian bookstore? I was like, it's Under Oath, Mom. They're a Christian band. Leave me alone. Yeah. Like, so, but that album was really weird because I was used to listening to like Skillet, 1,000 Foot Crutch, and Red, and I had started listening to like Breaking Benjamin and 3 Days Grace, so really mainstream heavy rock stuff. Yeah. And I put this album in. I've never heard anything like it. Like, this is my introduction to metal. And I'm just like, this album makes me uncomfortable. Like, I feel very on edge, kind of anxious, which I'm not a very anxious person. That interested me because it made me feel something. I was like, I don't ever feel this way. I don't know what I'm feeling, and I don't love it, but I want to hear that again because let me experience that again. And that record is such a journey because there's like writing on the walls. How the heck does that song become as popular as it is? I don't know how it's one of their biggest songs because it is one of their best songs in my opinion. But I didn't think the rest of the world would think that because there's no chorus, there's no verses, there's no anything. It starts and it ends. It goes to a different place every moment. You know, it's a nightmare for people who listen to the radio. Right. You know, and I absolutely loved it. And the more I listened to that record, the more comfortable I was because I was like, I know every turn this is gonna take because I know this record inside and out now. That was a heavy influence on me. And then the weird thing is, just I have a bad habit of when I get into a band, I don't backtrack on them. I just follow them from there.
Okay.
I didn't hear Chasing Safety. I didn't hear any of it until they were broke up and Disambiguation was out.
Wow.
So
Wow.
now I love that record, but I
Yeah.
just never went back for some reason. I bought Define. Then when Lost in the Sound came out, bought that record,
Yeah.
bought Disambiguation. And then one day said, you know what? I know it's like $25 at my local FYE, and that's why I've been avoiding buying it because it's expensive and rare at this point.
Yeah.
And we didn't quite have streaming as like easy to get a hold of now as it was. Finally, I was like, whatever, I'm gonna go buy it. And then I was like, I was stupid. Why didn't I buy this like 10 years ago?
Yeah. Did you go back further and check out like their stuff that came out prior to that as well?
I have since then, but just because of the lineup changes and everything, I see it as a totally different band. You know, like Spencer came in for Chasing Safety, and that kind of set a precedent. None of their albums are the same album at all. They do a really good job of reinventing themselves.
It's true.
But there are things that those albums share in common that, I mean, number one, if you have a band where you not only have one vocalist with an extremely unique voice, but you have two, number one, screw you, because that's very lucky. And like that's why bands like Linkin Park and Under Oath, in my opinion, are so iconic, is you have two vocalists and people will fight over who's the best and who should sing more.
Yeah.
And it's so awesome. It makes the band very unique. So that will carry over into every record, except Disambiguation. But Spencer can carry that band if he wants to, even though I'm so happy that Aaron is back because he adds so much to that band. But I could talk about them forever.
Yeah.
So,
so they've had a little bit of an impact.
Right, a little bit of an impact.
Little bit.
So those are probably the big three that I know. I mean, there's
How about
more,
Linkin
like I
Park?
said.
Because when I listen to you guys, I hear a lot of I hear in the way, and this might be a sad moment, but I just have a feeling that you probably connected with Chester.
Yes.
In a pretty big way, as far as your music goes. I hear a lot of him in your vocals.
That means a lot to me. You're not the first person that has told me that, and every time I'm just like, God, I don't necessarily hear it, but Jesus, that's an honor to hear. Yes, Linkin Park is one of my favorite bands of all time. They're definitely one of the most influential on me. I think Meteora is the best record ever written. Ever. Like, and that's hard for me. I'm a music fanatic, and on any given day, it's really hard for me to pick like my favorite artists of the day and everything. That record to me, I'm just like, that's my favorite record, period. Wow. And a lot of people are like, why not Hybrid Theory? And I'm like, okay, listen here. Hybrid Theory has some of the best songs they've ever written, but as a front to back album, there's a few songs that aren't as good as the others. Like, not every song on that record is as good as In the End or Crawling or any. I think Meteora, every song is super important, solid. The track listing, like the order, like it's an emotional journey of ups and downs, and they don't let you stay in one spot too long before they bring you to another place. And the mix on that record, I don't know how it sounds that good from 2003. I mean, you go listen to like My Chemical Romance's first big record and like Silverstein. Like, I absolutely love those bands, and they're huge, and those are huge records. The mixes on them to me are not that great.
Right.
I don't know how Linkin Park sounds as good as it is. Kudos to that. I forgot his name, the guy that mixed and mastered, and the guy that produced that record. That makes me upset right now. But
it's all right. I don't know what it is.
I'm a nerd and I know this stuff, but I forgot. But yeah, Chester, he passed away in, I believe it was, I always forget if it was June or July, but I think it was July of 2017. And because I remember where I was when I heard that he passed. My old drummer actually messaged me and was like, dude, the vocalist of Linkin Park committed suicide. I did not believe him. I was like, this guy's yanking my chain. He's just playing with me or whatever. And it turned out to be real. And I remember exactly where I was. I was leaving work. I was about to go see my parents out at the beach because they were on vacation. And I went home and cried in my shower. I was very upset. And I cried. Wow. You can ask my wife. She knows. She didn't quite understand it because, she didn't have like the connection to Linkin Park or Chester that I did. But it felt like someone that I knew died. And I knew I never got to meet Chester, sadly. But it was like this individual who poured so much into me when I was a child. And I started to realize, I was like, now that he's gone, I'm like, I think about this topic that way because of how Chester talked about it in his lyrics or in interviews. I'll be like, wow, this man had a lasting effect on me as an individual that I will always take with me. And I never met him. And that's why this hurts so much.
Yeah.
and there's only been a few individuals, like, I really don't get upset about celebrity deaths that often. Like, one that hurts from, like, just a perspective of respect for his work, like Robin Williams.
Sure.
Love Robin Williams. And that hurt, you know, like, growing up with his movies and seeing his art. But it was different when Chester passed. That is, I don't think anybody will ever have the impact that he had on me.
Wow.
Especially just, also, like, that band taught me to enjoy other genres. Like, because when you're a kid, I think you find what you like, and then you kind of become an elitist about it, and you don't even realize it. You're like, if it doesn't sound like this, then I don't like it. Like, I had this weird thing, like, growing up. Like, I listened to a lot of new metal, obviously. So, like, Breaking Benjamin and Red and stuff. And I used to think that Reliant K and Green Day were trying to do that, but they weren't good at writing riffs.
Okay.
And I thought that those bands, I was like, you'll never be a Breaking Benjamin. I was a dumb kid. I didn't realize they're playing a different genre, and exactly what you're hearing is what they intend for you to hear. Like, that's on purpose. I love those bands now, by the way.
Yeah,
but too. I was a kid and just thought the only good music is like this music.
Yeah.
And Linkin Park, when they released, it was their fourth record. What was it called? 1,000 Suns.
Yeah.
Very weird record. It's weird to this day. And when it came out, I was disappointed at first, and I was like, oh no, like they're losing their edge, and they don't know. Maybe they just don't know how to write the same kind of stuff they used to. And dumb thoughts you think as a kid. And it's like, no, they did this completely intentionally. And this is actually in some ways far more creative direction for them, because they know how to write those songs you've already heard. It would get so boring if they kept writing that same record over.
Yeah.
I would listen to all of them if they all sounded like Meteora. But from their perspective, and then they reinvented themselves every record. And I was like, that's incredible. And I was one of the few people that I knew that could say, is like, I owned every one of them physically, all of them, even past when it was like, you're still buying CDs, what's wrong with you, you know, like so huge influence on me. Linkin Park and Chester, I think about him all the time. That's a real tough one. It's a great example of, you can have all the money and the fame in the world, but that's not, it doesn't bring you happiness per se. It could be like an accessory to happiness, but that's not your source of happiness, you know? But yeah, that was a really, really hard one.
Yeah, man. It's like when things like that happen, it's like, what do I do with this now?
Yeah.
You know? And it was a similar thing with Robin Williams. You know, you mentioned him as well. And it's like, oh man, this is somebody who makes so many people happy. He's brought so much joy and laughter into people's lives. Like, and speaking like on Robin Williams, like he was so silly and so like fun loving, but
it's not who you'd expect.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I think it taught a lot of people about how mental health works, and how, like, it's not always going to be obvious, you know, that somebody is struggling internally. And I think I hate that it comes at the cost of losing people that are important to you, or role models.
Wow.
But that paying that cost, I think it woke a lot of people up. I really do. And I think that it comes in different crowds. Like, obviously, like the people that comes to that realization through Robin Williams is a different crowd than comes to it through Chester. Chester just sent a wave, and then it immediately followed with oh shoot, brain fart, Soundgarden. Their vocalist. He passed away. Chris Cornell. Cornell. Yeah, he passed, and those are very closely related because I think Chris passed first. Yeah, Chris passed first because Chester passed on his birthday, because he had to sing at Chris's funeral. And so, not saying the two are necessarily related, but I will say that there's no way he wasn't dealing with some extreme emotional stress that day.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's really tough, but really, really rough. But yeah, man, I actually recently, have you ever heard of a band called Too Close to Touch?
No, I haven't.
Incredible band. I definitely would highly suggest some of their records. Their vocalist actually recently just passed, but it was due to health complications. There wasn't any like self-harm involved. I was very relieved to hear that.
Yeah.
But that's only, like I said, there's very few people that have passed that have affected me in a way where I was like, oh man, this is rough. Like, and that just happened like 2 weeks ago, and that's been affecting me here lately. Thinking about him, I only got to meet him one time, and it was like like we were at Warped Tour. We got to speak to him for a few moments as a fan, and didn't really get to sit and have like a real conversation one-on-one or anything. But yeah, that one really affected me. He was a great guy. Keaton Pierce is his name.
That's cool. There's something, when we think about this genre of music, there is something about, these bands and these artists that they, for the most part, this is not true necessarily across the board, but there is something about them where they tend to be more approachable than, when you would think about someone who's a big deal in, maybe a mainstream, more mainstream genre of music where, like we were at Furnace Fest last year. And I was talking, I don't know if you probably didn't get this far in the conversation yet, but when I was talking to Chad, that's one of the things he brought up on the podcast was just like the dudes from Taking Back Sunday, the dudes from Emery, like all these bands, they're just kind of like walking around and they're mingling with people. And it's like, and his thought was, like he was kind of like taken back by it at first, but he's like, yeah, you know what, like why wouldn't they be? Why wouldn't I be, like walking, because that's what it's about. It's about connecting with people. I was listening to an interview with Josh Scoggin from Norma and the Chariot and now 68, and that was his thing. And I remember going to like one of the early Chariot shows on the Youngbloods tour back in, I think it was 04. And I was talking to Chad about this too, in like the basement of a church, and literally like the dudes, like where I was standing, it's this small venue, and literally like 10 feet from these guys, like 10 feet from Josh, while he's climbing up on his speakers and like jumping off and like and like pulling the backdrop off the wall and wrapping himself in it and just doing ridiculous things. Like he broke the headstock off of I think it was the bass. Like he jumped down and like I can't remember who I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember like one of the instruments breaking because he jumped off this thing and the dude wasn't happy about it.
That man, like, that man has to like.
There's just this craziness, but
when he walks into a Guitar Center or wherever he's buying his equipment now, he must be like, all right, give me 4 of them because I will break the first 3 in the first 3 days of tour. So
it's so nuts. but that was like that's what his heart was that he was expressing, was just like that. I like wanting to be close and connected with the people that are, here checking this out. And I think that's why there is such a community aspect around this. And that's why, you can be there's such a broad spectrum of people, of artists that are involved in this music scene, from those that are, like hardcore Christians, and then the people that might be like straight edge, people that are atheists, people that are, all kinds of people. But yet we can all go to a hardcore show and we can all watch out for each other, take care of each other. Yeah. And there's definitely that communal aspect to it that I just don't think there aren't too many other places in life where it exists. I mean, it should exist in the church.
Right, it should.
and in many cases I think it does. But there's definitely things that I've just learned about relating to people just by being involved like I'm involved in terms of, I'm just a listener. I've never been in a band like this, but just kind of being connected to the music scene and seeing people relate to one another and protect and defend each other and all of that. It's a really special thing.
I think one struggle that the church has is that everybody involved with the church is in a completely different part of their walk. Like they're like some people at the very start, some people are at the very, whatever you might consider, the end. But everyone's in a different place, so it's really hard to establish a culture of that thing that we experience in the mosh pit. Which is a weird thing to describe, but I always tell people this story of it goes back to how you were talking about like the music being tackling like dark themes and everything. I've always loved August Burns Red had a t-shirt that they sold for, I think they still sell it. It's probably like one of their best selling t-shirts, and it says on the back real big, angry music for happy people. And love it. Kind of just expresses like what this whole thing's about. And I went to go see them, I think it was in New Orleans, House of Blues, like 2017, 2018, something like that. And I felt that very thing once again. Me and my buddy brought a guy who'd never been to a show ever in his life. And we were like, do you listen to metal music? And he's like, I've heard a Slipknot song before. And I was like, okay, we might just be about to scare you away forever. But here, let's go do it anyway. We'll buy you a ticket. Yeah. So we took him to see August Burns Red. This boy, I don't get in the pit. I'm short. I am elbow height, and I have a massive nose. So I'm just asking to have, like, most
Prime
people
for
think
nose
that
breaks.
this looks like this because I got smacked in the mosh pit. I'm like, no, I'd hate to see it if I ever did get smacked in the mosh pit. So, and I have very poor coordination. So I get in there, I'm just going to end up knocked out on the floor in a blood puddle. But this guy that we brought along who's never been to a metal show was like, that looks like fun. Jumped right in. He got smacked in the nose, and there's blood everywhere, and we thought, oh no, we've ruined him. He'll never listen to this music. He came out with blood all over his face going, I love it here. This is so cool. And we were like, I don't know why he just turned into Jerry Seinfeld, but we were like, oh my God, I don't know what just happened, but we've created a monster. And he felt that very same thing. He was like, that was the craziest thing ever. I've never met any of these people. But like if someone fell, it was like at least like 30 to 40 people doing like the circle pit and getting real violent.
Sure.
If someone fell down, everyone stopped, picked them up. Hey, you good? You all right? They checked on them. Cool, let's go. And they just kept going. And he was like, that was the weirdest thing. And like, for instance, like when we were there, it was packed. I mean, it was like wall to wall. You know, I got some person's sweat on this arm, another person's sweat on this arm because I'm so close to people. And I like found a T-shirt on the ground at one point, and I was like, "Oh man, this is like something they're selling over there. Someone must have dropped their T-shirt." So I kept it on my arm, and I looked around. I was like, "There's no way I'm finding them in this crowd." So at the end of the show, like an hour later, when this crowd starts like dispersing, I kind of hung around, and I noticed someone looking around kind of hard. And I was like, hey man, are you missing like a ABR shirt? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, is this it? And he was like, bro, thank you so much. Like, why didn't you just take that? And I was like, because I knew someone here. I didn't know it was you, but I knew you were here somewhere. Yeah. And he was like, bro, I've only experienced nothing but love from strangers here at this show. Wow. And I was like, that's because this band in particular, August Burns Red, has established a culture that surrounds their band of love. I mean, shoot, their singer Jake has that whole organization, Heart Support, and I was like, and you feel it here, and outsiders don't understand that about our music scene. They're like, it sounds evil, and because I don't understand it, they're like, it. I don't get the music, and the people are rough, look like they got tattoos, and they got that they don't understand that the lyrical context of it is it's not a place of anger and it's not a place of violence. It's a place of hurt and as a place of relating to other people. And so the people that are in that scene together, like, you don't even have to know each other. Like, I know why you're here. You're here for the same reason I'm here, and it's because this band makes me feel something, and they treat me like a person, and they're not a celebrity. Like, they're just like, that's why everybody loves like Garrett from Silent Planet. You listen to Silent Planet?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, like I just got to see them the other day with Fit for a King and Hollow Front and Avoid. It was
that's awesome.
It's
a good show.
But that's why everybody loves that band, because they're one of the most personal bands that you'll ever meet, and just such nice, loving people. But it's crazy that you find that in such a, like I said, like violent sounding, aggressive music scene. But that is a trend. Weird thing that me and my friends have never been able to figure out. Like early 2000s, almost all of the metal bands that were really killing it, they're all Christian bands. Yeah. All of them. Like, it was really hard to find one that was the big deal, and they weren't Christian. Yeah.
The Christian side of this genre, I've been thinking about that a lot lately, how they've really pushed it. They've in a lot of ways, a lot of those bands that were Christian bands really pioneered this thing and pushed it to a new level. Right. Would you consider, I apologize if you don't like this question.
No, I feel like go for it. They're all...
But do you consider, are you a Christian in a hardcore band, or do you guys consider yourselves a Christian? Not that you're a hardcore band per se, but I kind of lump that into a category. So Christian, are you a Christian metal band or Christian metalcore band, or are you a Christian in a band?
Right. Yeah. The answer to that is definitely no. We're not a Christian band, and the reason for that is that it's just a marketing scheme. And I'm not saying that anyone who's ever been in a band that considered themselves a Christian band was like sleazy, or they were just scheming to get your money. It was something that was like by the labels and the representatives that were about the money part of this thing, because there's a lot of money in Christian music, and there always has been. That was a marketing scheme, and it kind of, I think that it established some misconceptions in people's heads about people that have been very damaging to the faith just in general. I think that's one reason why, like, you find the members of Under Oath are so split on their faiths, because they weren't allowed to be real people. And I'll tell you this, I don't really listen to a lot of like modern contemporary music as far as Christian goes, but I know all the artists. Jeremy Camp is not as perfect as he looks. And he will tell you that, but he'll say it in a very humble way, because he's a humble guy and he's a good, nice guy. But if Jeremy Camp ever slipped up, stubbed his toe, and said the F word, he'd be canceled. Yeah. And that's not to me, I don't see that as being like a problem of Jeremy Camp, and I'm just throwing out a random name.
Sure.
That could be anyone, Mercy Me, whatever. That is a problem of the church, and that is a problem of human beings. It's like, you really think they're that high above you?
Right.
That things like that don't happen? Yeah. Not to mention that we could talk about curse words all day, because I think it's a really silly cultural thing that we take that so seriously, and it's like those words didn't even exist till like 1,000 and plus 500 years after Jesus died. Like, that's a cultural thing, and the church has issues adapting to cultural changes. It always has over the course of decades or hundreds of years. I mean, when I grew up, having a tattoo was like the end of it. Like, you couldn't have a tattoo. Now you got youth pastors with sleeves. You know, and you have to have an ongoing dialogue of, okay, what are things that are actual issues because of we can read our religious doctrine and know, okay, that has no place in our faith. And what are some things where it's just the old people in the faith really couldn't adjust to the changing of culture, and they would like to have twisted scripture to say that that's a bad thing that you're doing because I don't like it and I'm uncomfortable with it. Tattoos or saying certain words or what have you. But there are some things that, like, obviously, like, if you don't believe that Jesus rose again on the third day, which you'd be shocked how many religious leaders are saying, maybe he didn't, you know, like, maybe it's just like a symbolic thing. And it's like, no, that you're not a Christian. I'm sorry. Like, I'm just going to call it out. Like, if you don't believe that Christ died and rose again, you're something, but you're not a Christian. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just...
Yeah, that, like, progressive Christianity, so to speak, and deconstructed.
The deconstructed. And I think to some degree there's some room for deconstruction, because, like I said, like, I hate that word because it doesn't get separated. Right. Like, the cultural part of deconstruction, like, I was taught to feel extremely guilty for listening to music that wasn't, and this is a good segue to bring it back around, I did not listen to any band that wasn't a Christian band as a child. And when I did, I felt horrible about it. I had this horrible guilt. And it was a case of, a lot of times there were Christians in that band, or maybe the whole band was a Christian, but they weren't marketed that way by the Christian record label, or they weren't in the store. And then there were Christian bands, not a single song is about God or Jesus. But the Christian culture, we didn't care about that. We were like, they're a Christian band, though. They're marketed that way, and we're eating it up with a big spoon. Like, that's what I think that's why I say there's misconceptions. Like, I actually had an ex-girlfriend, obviously back like early high school, where she was upset with me for listening to 3 Days Grace, and I was like, okay, for instance, the new music at the time, I was like, what's the difference between a love song from 3 Days Grace and Yours to Hold from Skillet? And she was like, Skillet's a Christian band. I was like, that song's not about Jesus, it's about a girl. She's like, doesn't matter. And I was like, you're falling for a marketing scheme. You are literally not. You do not see the people. You only see the label, and you can't get past these cultural issues of, these are real human beings just like you. They're not robots. They're people, and they, you know, I don't know. It's very, very irritating to me. So, and even like Tooth and Nail, I've seen like a bunch of interviews like Brandon Evil where they were like, well, we really weren't a Christian label, but because a lot of the people involved with the label were faith-based, we would find these faith-based bands. Most of the bands ended up being faith-based, especially since at the time when the label was coming up, as we were talking about, they were all hardcore bands and metal bands. So most of them ended up being Christian bands. And the label got that rep. Now there's been a lot of not Christian bands on that label who have been given that title. like there are bands on Solid State and on Tooth and Nail right now with curse words in their music, and then people will get on Instagram and be like, "How dare you say those words? Because I'm uncomfortable about it." And they're like, "We're not even a Christian band." They're like, "But you're on Tooth and Nail." It's like you're falling for the marketing scheme that they didn't even mean to do, you know?
Right.
But yeah, it's just the weirdest thing. Like that same ex-girlfriend that I was talking about. We went to see a Skillet show, probably that same era, like when I was like 16, and her mother brought up to me while we are in the line about to meet them for the VIP thing, like, I was disappointed when I found out they weren't signed to a Christian label. And I was like, they're on Atlantic Records. That is one of the biggest labels in the world. I mean, massive. And she was like, yeah, that should be a Christian label. And I was like, I guarantee you not everyone that works at Tooth and Nail is a Christian.
Sure.
Or maybe they're they're halfway out the door. But
right.
Like, that's not what it's about. You know, that's the weirdest thing to me. Like, but kids fell for it too. Like, when we were kids, everyone listening like Panic at the Disco and Fall Out Boy, they were on this really cool little indie label called Fueled by Ramen. Kids thought that was real cool. That's so punk rock. Fueled by Ramen. Fueled by Ramen is a subsidiary of Atlantic Records. So it was one of the hugest labels in the world, and the label was like, I think kids would like it. We could trick them into thinking we're this tiny punk rock label, and we'll call it something trendy, like Fueled by Ramen Noodles. Like,
that's so good.
It's a marketing ploy. And the Christian music thing always has been. So it's like, I'm a Christian. Several of the dudes in my band are Christian. Some of us are in spots where we're not really sure. But we're not just like paint it with the same brush thing. I'm also not trying to put like these expectations on me where it's like, I understand that people that make art are in a position of influence, but at the end of the day, I would like to be one of those that kind of breaks that wall down of you shouldn't see me necessarily as a hero. It's okay. I would love to do my best to be a great influence on kids on other people that like my band's music, which that I love that people are digging the music. But at the end of the day, I'm just like you. Yeah. Where I'm a human being with struggles, and a lot of times it'll probably be the same as theirs. And I'm here to relate. I'm not here to be above you on this. You know what I mean? Like, I'm here to be a part of the experience when we're at the shows with the crowd, not be like, I don't know, it's some kind of weird self-worship thing, I actually touch on that in some of the record too. We have the third EP, which this is a debut, will be called Self-Worship. Because it kind of speaks about that.
Wow.
So,
that's something that I think, man, so many bands, like when you go back to those early 2000s and kind of the real sort of beginning years of this Christian underground scene.
Right.
And I think that that's something that so many of these Christian artists struggled with, was what you were talking about, like these high expectations that were placed on them to act a certain way, to only talk a certain way. And then God forbid somebody, backstage at a show or somebody in the parking lot or whatever, like heard somebody, drop an F-bomb or, just say something or act out of character. And it's like, well, hold on. Like I was a kid in high school and I formed this band, and then like you put me up on this pedestal where like, I'm great. Of course there's the gratitude for, being, not praised, but the gratitude for, getting to that point where you have people following you and that love your music.
Yeah. You get the support.
And there's like this automatic thing that happens where, you're a Christian artist, you're a Christian band, you're a role model. It's an automatic thing. I don't imagine, I'm not really as connected to all of the inner workings in that way today as I was back then. I don't imagine that there's exactly the same level of that kind of thing attached to it today as there used to be back then. Yeah, well, a lot of bands are steering away from being labeled as that anyway. Because I think there's all this stuff that gets attached with it, and it's like, well, people, would get ostracized, and people that, they'd have a mistake or a slip up or whatever, and it's like, like, do you not see that we're like out here, we're touring, like this is not an easy life, like we've got stuff going on, and well, some things weren't even necessarily slip ups. It was like, I don't believe that I'm in the wrong with this, but I'm just it's a cultural taboo. It's not necessarily a biblical sin or something that is like in the doctrine of, if I do this, then it's wrong. It's literally just a cultural thing that people are uncomfortable with. That's true. Like I remember when I first started listening to metal music, John Cooper had no tattoos.
now he's covered. That's the vocalist for Skillet, for people that don't know. Like, he's covered because, and they just did like Winter Jam. And that's like one of the biggest Christian tours of all time. It's not like it used to be. I'm not saying that there isn't some people out there that still view that in a certain way, but not like it was in the 90s. You know what I mean? So in just a few short decades, that has gone from being, you know, we will argue that to the ends of the earth, that the Bible says you're going to hell if you have a tattoo, you know, okay, we're past that now. Like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? But then also, where do we stop? Because there is a point where you should stop, where it's like, you can't, okay, not anything goes as long as you try to reimagine the scriptural text to how you want it. You should be searching for what's the actual truth. And are you willing to accept it even if it hurts? Even if it means you have to accept cultural change, or even if you have to accept, I can't change the text, and I want to, but I have to abide by these rules if I want to do what God is telling me to do. So we struggle with both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got a pretty big show coming up.
I do.
I was so stoked when I saw. So you're playing with Devil Wears Prada and with Era. I saw Era at for the first time at Furnace Fest. Nice. And I didn't know how good they were, but they're fun, man.
Furnace Fest isn't
they're cool, but
exclusively Christian acts, right?
No, and that's like.
Did it used to be?
No, not even back then.
Okay.
You know, Chad Chad Johnson, who was on the podcast a couple weeks ago, who was very influential in that Christian underground music scene going back to those early 2000s. He had that label, Take Hold Records,
right?
And just a small record that eventually, small record label that eventually got acquired by Tooth and Nail,
right?
Who was like becoming really big back in those days and gaining a lot of traction. And
I watched the label podcast.
There you go. A lot of those bands, man, like early Norma Jean before they were even called that. Under Oath. When they were still 238. Like a lot of these bands,
What was it, Ludacris?
Ludacris. Yep.
I love it,
man. Like a lot of these bands, Anne Berlin back in those days. Me Without You. You know, kind of going back into those days, and a lot of these bands that became extremely influential. But even back then they had a whole plethora of bands coming. It was always kind of meant to be that thing, and I think that's kind of back to what we were talking about. You know, I think that we are so prone toward trying to draw a line between secular and sacred in our lives, where, you know, this is something spiritual that I do and this is not that. This is spiritual, this is my church life connected to the things that I do that are quote unquote for God because I feel spiritual when I'm doing them, and then the other stuff that I do. And it's like, well, no, if you're a Christian, if you're a child of God, if you're a son or daughter of God, then like everything about your life in a sense should be spiritual. Because you're always connected to God. So whether you're going to your quote unquote secular job or you're, you know, doing whatever, if your heart is to serve the Lord, and going back to what you said a minute ago, we do have to, there is definite balance there. And there's not just like, we can't just make our own rules and be like, oh, I do what I want, but in the name of serving Jesus. Like we can get real weird and out there.
Like, I know the text says this, but I kind of live everything else but that, you know, or I interpreted it this way.
Exactly.
You know, like, it's like, well,
and I'm not talking about that.
That's
not what I'm talking about. But I am, you know, say like I only brought that up to say like his heart in the thing from the beginning was just bringing people together. And he said this in the podcast, like, I want to set a table, and then, you know, just basically people are going to know where I stand. You know, people are going to know my heart. And he's been very outspoken about his love for Jesus, and he's done all kinds of missions work and still does to this day. And everything, but the heart of it was always to just kind of bring people together. You know? It wasn't just this is for Christians or this is for Christian bands.
I'll only ask because like so I've never seen Era live. I just recently listened to like their newest album. It's really, really good. But I'm kind of new to Era, to be honest, which is strange. It's just one of those bands that slipped through the cracks. I did listen to a bit of Texas in July whenever I was a kid, though, and I know JT from that band. That was his old band. And I knew that I think Texas in July was kind of a Christian band, if I'm not mistaken, from back in the day. I think,
I don't know,
or at least some of the members were outspoken. I'm not entirely sure, but I was just wondering because I didn't know. I know Furnace Fest features a lot of them, but it also featured a lot of Tooth and Nail solid state bands. So, but yeah, we're playing with them. I'm excited because they're another Alabama band. A lot of people don't know that. There's like Gideon and Era. Like when it comes to like the big names where everyone knows, and even Gideon, I don't know, maybe they put Alabama on their T-shirts or whatever. Like, but like most bands are just like, shh, if you're not from California or or Ohio,
right,
you don't put it on your merchandise, But people are weird when they hear our music and see our stuff. They're like, "Where are you from?" Like, Alabama. They're like, "What?" Like that's the weirdest thing. But, like,
but Alabama was like a big part of that early scene of the underground Christian music scene, because of like I mean, this is where Chad Johnson was back in the day, and this is where a lot of stuff got started. But it's not that those bands were from here. It's just that there are a lot of, I'd say, roots here in Alabama. But a lot of the bands come from like North Carolina and other places where there was like a much bigger scene. As you said, Ohio, of course, California.
Yeah. There's a lot of bands from Florida too. But people, even though we're like literally
Under
Alabama and Florida
right?
are touching, people. Yeah, Under Oath's from Florida. A Day to Remember's from Florida. Wage War is from Florida.
Yeah.
I could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
But people, including people from Alabama, like Alabama and Florida are touching, but it feels like they're on the other side of the world. Like the culture is very different because there's just like every kind of person you can imagine in Florida, and so it's such a melting pot.
Yeah, it's true.
Of a state.
It's almost a different country.
Yeah, exactly. I love Florida. I absolutely love it. And I love playing there. But yeah, we're playing in Florida with Era, and then the Devil Wears Prada, man. That is huge. I actually forgot to mention them earlier. They're also a massive influence. But maybe I didn't mention them because like they're still such a massive influence. Like Under Oath is too, but like some of the other bands I mentioned are, like I still absolutely love them. But obviously my music doesn't sound anything like them.
Sure.
But yeah, these days like we're really influenced by like Wage War and Spirit Box and Silent Planet, Architects, and the Devil Wears Prada, things like that. So yeah, we're opening for some childhood heroes. So that's going to be really, really cool.
That's fun, man.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Well, congratulations, bud, for real. Congratulations on, the success that you guys are having right now, and the level where you are right now, where things are taking off, and the new music that you've been putting together, and all the stuff that's on the horizon for you guys. It's so cool, and I'm pumped for you guys.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming out here. I've really enjoyed reconnecting with you for sure. All the technical difficulties and everything, even that, it was fun.
We got it working though. So
yeah, it worked out.
Next time we'll know.
Next time we know exactly what to do. That's true. I just had deja vu like for a while. It just kept going. Did that ever happen to you?
Here before,
where it's like I know this, and then it just keeps happening. Yeah,
that's the weirdest feeling ever.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, brother. Well, thank you, man. Where can people go to check out some music or to check out some other stuff? Where would you point people?
Yeah, the name of the band is Afterdusk, so we're on Spotify, Apple Music, pretty much anywhere that you listen to your music. You can stream our stuff. We're on Instagram. I believe it's Afterdusk Band is the name of it. It should pop up. But yeah, we're pretty much everywhere. You type in Afterdusk Band, you're probably going to find us.
Okay. And did you say this? I believe the website is afterduskband.com.
Afterdusk Music.
Oh, Afterdusk Music.
Yep,
Thank you. Sorry about that.
AfterduskMusic.com. Yep, you can find our music videos on YouTube or on the website. We have merchandise for sale. So yeah, wherever you want to find us.
Yeah, check it out. Check it out, guys. I think this is the first time we've looked at the camera.
Probably.
What up?
I keep looking at the TV screen, but just not the.
Yeah, we've got that thing up
camera.
But thank you guys for checking out this interview with Matt Boykin. Am I pronouncing that last name correctly?
Yeah.
I assumed it was like it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever said your last name out loud before.
Probably not. It's an ugly last name, so most people don't.
Last name.
I love my family, but Boykin. Boy, I'm from the South, that's
Boykin.
for sure.
Do you know what the etymology or the origination of that last name is?
I feel like I've looked it up before, but I don't remember, to be completely honest.
All right.
I'll tell you this. I am loosely, and it's not blood, it is through marriage, but I am related to Rascal Flatts. which
All right.
the singer Gary, because he married my mother's cousin.
Oh, sweet.
So it's fairly close. But I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
Why couldn't it be related to like I don't know, like someone in Slayer or something?
Yeah.
Like,
It's like I want to put some pressure on that relationship. They're in the music industry, but it'd be better if they were connected more to this
maybe it's
scene.
better that I'm not though.
Yeah.
You know? Be annoying, but
Well, good deal, man. Thanks for wearing the uniform today.
Man. This is pretty much, I get picked on for like this being all I wear. Like that and band shirts. I almost wore an Under Oath shirt, but it's like, oh man, I'm probably going to talk about Under Oath here. I don't want to look like that much of a dweeb. I got to stop wearing band shirts.
That's like where you wear the shirt of the band that you're going to see.
Right.
I don't care. That bothers people. I don't care at all.
Right.
I think
don't
it's
know.
fine.
I'm a nerd. Like, I feel like I could just, like, interesting factoid about this band while I adjust my invisible glasses. I could do that all day. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good deal. Well, everybody, thank you guys for checking out this episode. Really, really appreciate you guys. Hope you got something out of it. If you did, if you consider subscribing, sharing, or leaving a review, that would mean the world to me. And Matt, thank you again, brother. Really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me on, dude.
Yeah, man. Good luck with everything.
Yeah.